Nice.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone, I'm Viktor, and with me I have William. And as Herbert said, we work for North Creation Agency, or Kreationsbyrån. And we're here to talk a bit about headless development with Stripe. I wish I had Uncle Cheese's counter, so I could just place a 1 there. So like, we at least have some headless with us this year as well. These are some of the things we're going to talk about. Headless development in general, just a brief overview. When we think you should do it and why it's a good thing. A bit about Stripe as a headless solution. What can Stripe offer that no other solutions can. A bit about choosing your API. Should you use REST? Should you use GraphQL? What are the concerns that determine which one you should choose? And we're going to showcase some of our modules that we have created for doing headless development with Stripe. And just some front-end and code showcase of the projects we've been doing. Okay, oh, sorry. Headless development, I'm sure you guys know already, but it's pretty much just having a decoupled front-end and back-end with communication going all through APIs. So, for instance, you could have an app and a website, and they all speak to the backend in the same way. And the neat thing about Stripe is that it offers us a good way to just set up the backend. We have a nice admin interface, data modeling, and a lot of different systems that you all know and love. So we think there are some main pros and cons about doing headless development. The one that you hear the most is, of course, that it makes your project more modular. You can choose to replace different parts as you wish. You can add more front ends and integrations pretty easily. One thing that I don't think is mentioned enough is probably that when you start a new project, you always have the option to replace some of the parts of your setup, because you're probably going to be using the same stack most of the times. But if you want to try something new, you have the option to just replace one part instead of replacing the entire system. The second point is a bit, I maybe need some explanation. There are many ways to do headless development. The most traditional way is some sort of, like contentful way where you have objects and a fixed page structure. And the pages just know which data they need to fetch. They need, okay, this is my product page, I need to fetch this product. But with Stripe, you usually create pages in a site tree. And so it's supposed to be dynamic and configurable. And this makes it hard to do with a more traditional way of like GraphQL. But we're going to talk a bit more about that later. One good thing we think as well is to get to try all the new cool toys that are available every year. And if you can name all of these, please email me, I'll give you a reward. So some of the main cons, though, are, of course, that it's a bit more complex than just doing things the normal Stripe way, the way it's made to do, like create sites. It's a bit more time-consuming, it's a bit more complex. There are a lot of different parts you need to know more about to do headless development, we think. And the dynamic data, as I said, when you have dynamic site trees, things like this, it can be a bit bothersome with you won't find a tutorial on how to do this. So, they're supposed to say Stripe there. I can't really see if you can see it, but we want to talk about why should you use Stripe for headless development. One of the main parts, we think, is data modeling. We have used a Swedish word here that you maybe learned yesterday, I'm not sure. And we like the term because it really describes sort of the neat feeling you get when something is just like, oh, this is good, we like it. So, smooth data modeling. You can do a bunch of different like validation, on-before-writes, and everything that's just good with Stripe. You get the dynamic site tree. As I mentioned, most headless solutions usually don't provide a site tree for you. You can make your own using something like Contentful or GraphCMS or whatever, but most of the time they're meant to do like content pieces. But Stripe usually uses a site tree, and we have developed some systems to make this work with Next as well. Of course, there's the GraphQL module. I don't think Silverstripe headless development would work if this didn't exist. It's been such a revolutionizing thing, I think, for Silverstripe to have this GraphQL module, because it's so easy to get up and running with like new objects and just getting them out through an API. And yeah, it's just really great. The last point is maybe sometimes like a disadvantage, but a lot of times a big advantage with being self-hosted and flexible. I don't remember who said it yesterday, but you get to own your data when you're self-hosted. You can make sure that you always have access to everything and can change everything. It's very flexible, and this is why we really like it for clients when they don't have a good idea what they need or want in the future. You can always be sure that Silverstripe can provide a solution for almost any problem. While it's something like contentful or hosted solutions, you need to rely on the tools that are available. So the biggest part about headless that makes it different from normal like template development, I guess, is you need to choose an API. And choosing the API model can be a bit tricky if you don't know all the cases that could occur. We think that we have figured it out. It's a simple question. If you want to have control over your site tree and have a dynamic page layout, then you should probably use the REST API. And if you have more like a traditional headless site where you only create objects and fetch them through GraphQL, that's also a really great option. Silverstripe lets you easily do both, which is, of course, really nice for us. I'm going to go a bit more into detail about the GraphQL part. It's, of course, very hyped and cool and all, but is it good? We think that when the front end decides the page layout, it's great. It's probably the best alternative. You get, as a front-end dev, you get all the content available to you, and you can see everything that you need. You get typed APIs, comprehensible overview, and there's, of course, a lot of dev-friendly tools to use with like React or Vue or anything like this. When GraphQL is bad, is when the backend decides most of the things. If the backend has a very opinionated view of like how they want to present their pages, this is how the site tree should look and everything, it's pretty hard to fetch all this with GraphQL. You need to do some nested queries and a lot of different queries increasing with page types. So if you have 8 page types and you don't know what the home page type is in the front end, you need to do massive queries every time. And it's just not efficient and not fun for any developer. So we think that REST is probably the better option when you have a structure like this. Right.
Yes. So if we are going to go into a bit more how we did it, this is our basic sketch of our system. So we have our Silverstripe instance, and then we have a Next.js client on top of that. We actually have multiple Next instances because we use the Silverstripe subsites module. So we have different domains, but for simplicity, we just have one. Then we use, in the Next backend, we use our headless REST API that we developed, that we're going to show a bit more later. So we use that for all of the data that we use for the server rendering, so our site tree and everything related to pages, basically. So, and then for all client fetching mutations, we use the GraphQL API. So we can do all of the form submissions and stuff without page reloads. So that's really nice. As I said, GraphQL for client-side fetching. We use Next.js, so we get the really fast pages. And then we use the JSON web token module for authentication and the Next auth package that goes with Next. This is some YAML config code that we use in order to define our APIs. So it's really very inspired by the way the GraphQL form module works. So you just define for each class which fields we want to expose in the API, and we can choose from the fields that are already in the data model, or we can just write a method name, and the module will call that method and use that data. Yeah, so we can configure the fields and methods, as I said. And in the JavaScript code, we just defined types for all of this. So we have the types in the. That's one disadvantage of this, that we don't get the types automatically like you do in GraphQL. So I'm going to show you how we have set up the routes too. Let's see if I have to go out of this, then go into here. So we're doing a project called Tentipi for this, but I'm going to show you. So we have one route called Common, which serves the navigation, basically, based on the site tree in Silverstripe. It looks like this. We get all of the menu items and a link to that. Yeah, and all the child items. And then we also serve the site config here. So all of this is just configured in our YAML files, all of this data, so we can just choose what we want to expose. And some in the site tree we have some data here, like some common stuff like footers and yeah, different stuff. And then for the pages, we have this other endpoint that we call URL. So this is the root page, and we get all of the site data that we expose. So all of the elemental areas. So we match all the elements to React components in the front end. So we can just server render all this in Next, and we can just type any URL here, like. What do we have? Stratus. This is a product page. So we get the class name, and then Next picks this up and serves the correct template or the correct JS file for this. Yes, let's go back to the presentation. And this I've already shown. Yes, so when it comes to authentication, the project needed a logged-in site that the customers can use to store their personal data and some carts and show their orders and stuff like that. And we really couldn't rely on the base, like the default Silverstripe auth system, since we're doing headless. So we decided to go with JSON Web Tokens just because it's a common solution for decoupled systems. We can use validation on multiple backends, so we can validate our tokens in Silverstripe, but we can also, for example, give our e-commerce backend a private token and also validate calls to the e-commerce for like carts and stuff like that. And there's a module for it in Silverstripe, which is super nice. So we decided to go with that. And how did we do it? When we first looked into doing JSON Web Tokens, this was my feeling at least. How do I even do this? I have to do encryption and validate stuff and all of that. But as I said, thankfully there's a module for it. So we used the FireSphere Silverstripe GraphQL JSON Web Token library. And it has functionality for create token, validate token, even refresh token functionality. And it's implemented with the Silverstripe Authenticator, so we can use this both for the GraphQL API and all our own controllers, basically. So this is how our auth flow is working, very simplified, but the front end, well, on login, we request a token, and we validate the password and email, and send back a JSON Web Token, which can then be used both to access our Silverstripe APIs, like the the Headless API that we built and the GraphQL API. But we can also, when we add the e-commerce backend, which we're going to do to a project, then we can also validate tokens there. So that's really nice. What about logout and password reset? If you've ever worked with JSON Web Tokens, you may know that like reset password and logout is not something trivial to implement, and it wasn't any functionality that existed in the module. So we had to add that. So we forked the web token module and added this. Thankfully, the module was built in a way where each token had a corresponding database record, so we could like delete the record, and then even if you still have a token that's technically valid, when we check it against the database, it's not valid, so we can do logout in that way. Yeah, so maybe we should show some stuff.
Yeah,
because we've been referencing this project, but we haven't actually showed anything from it.
So, yeah, as William mentioned, we have been working with a client called Tentipi, and they are making, kind of like the name suggests, like Nordic teepee tents. And we have gotten the opportunity to build a pretty flashy site for them. This is our next front end on the test server, so some of the data will look a bit strange. It's a lot of lorem ipsum and stuff like this. But yeah, basically this is what we get in the end. And the thing that's really nice, oh, we didn't have a picture there. Oh yeah, we did. Is that you can use all of the functionality from Next, which is really nice to work with. It's really fast. It's really everything you could ask for. Yeah, and Tentipi has been very happy with the results, we think. And yeah, this is still a work in progress, though. We haven't released the site yet, but yeah. Another client we've been working with is Bestie Test. They make like product reviews, and they're like an affiliate site. They yeah, basically write reviews of products and link to some purchase links. And Sebastian at Kreationsbyrån has been in charge of this, and it's been a really fast, because they had an old site that was just Silverstripe templates, and we made a transition to this headless solution, and it's been really quick to implement, and we think that it could be a great alternative for future projects. Yeah. So also going to showcase just like the base functionality in all of this comes from the API calls. And all we need to do in Next is that we have one of these dynamic files in the root, which can just get the page and get the common data, and then map that thing to a page component like this. And everything is typed, because we used TypeScript to type our API, so we know all the data, and it's been a treat to work with, I think. Yeah. And you can also see some of our, this is the config file now for all our objects. It's growing every day with new types of things. And of course, this is how what we get for TypeScript, like big interface collections, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty much what we wanted to show, I think. Oh, we can also show, we also managed to do previews for our next site in the CMS, which is, it's pretty easy to do with Next, since they already have a functionality for this. For previews, you can just add a token and put the link for this into get preview link, I think it's called in Silverstripe. Yeah, so we just extended the controller and did this. It was really simple. So, yeah.
Cool. Looks really good. I did not know this. No. Fantastic. So the panel is, if you're ready, welcome up. Otherwise, or in the meantime, I can take some questions if there are any from the audience. David?
So how do you generate the types I probably asked this before, but like in the front end, is there any auto generation, or do you manually do it at the moment?
Sorry.
At the moment, we do manually. We started out with doing it using a VS Code extension that you can take like any JSON data and generate types automatically. But we felt that it was a bit too, sometimes it didn't get all the cases that we wanted. So we chose to do it manually right now. But getting automatic typing for this would be the biggest improvement to the module. But it's very difficult to do since we use custom methods in the API and stuff like this. So you can never know for sure, oh, this is going to be a string or whatever, just from the raw PHP data. So, yeah.
Okay. Oh, another
Two other
two more.
questions here, over there.
Hi, thanks. What does your development environment and deployment process look like? And will you offer up some kind of module?
Right, we forgot to mention that all of these modules are available on our site, on like a North Creation Agency GitHub page. You can find all the modules that we use for this. It's nothing super secret or super cool. It's just like an API module, and the JSON Web Token is also publicly available. And we've forked it and added some methods for creating users and like changing password and all of this. So it's free to use, but it's still like work in progress. So feel free to contribute.
Yeah, we actually, for the web token module, we actually forked Uncle Cheese's fork for the for the Silverstripe 4 upgrade. So it's like a double fork.
Yeah.
And what does your local
Sorry.
development environment look like? Is it one project and you
We
spin up
have
some Docker
for this
containers?
project is pretty. It's pretty insane, I would say, because we're using Docker to like have containers for everything. But the thing at first we did it locally, just had a local setup with Docker, but we found some issues with Docker for Mac and Silius, which is our e-commerce system. And it was just really slow with read and writes, and it's a common issue. So now we're doing all of that, but on a VPS. So we do like remote development for this project. It's working pretty well. It's very easy to do with VS Code. You can just pretty much set up a server anywhere, and you can just connect to any server with this. And it sets up a local server there, and you can just continue to develop like normal. The only way we could tell that it's not a local environment is like we need to do some port forwarding for everything, and it's sometimes very like a bit slow when you save or something like this. It feels like a little bit slow, but it's totally fine. And for builds, we use Buddy, if you know what that is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's so we have everything on the same server. We host like the PHP, both Silius and Silverstripe, and next frontend on the same server. So, and that's what we want when we do server-side rendering and static generation, because we need the communication to be fast between the Node server and the PHP server. So, yeah.
Okay.
And I think
Okay.
Andy had a
And
question.
Andy had
as
a
well.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. I have some websites with a similar setup with the dynamic pages and page composition, because I'm thinking like Silverstripe developers think. And do you have any solution for code splitting in the front end? Because I've always the problem then I have a maps element which has leaflet and huge amount of JS code, and I have it on every site, every page.
Yes, we did have a solution, but we got some like UI bugs in the front end when we were doing dynamic fetching. Yeah. So we have disabled it for now, but we're looking into to a solution to that. So like, yeah.
So dynamic imports with fetching the JavaScript.
Pretty much, I can show you in the slug file here. So right now we're mapping to these page types, but we would instead do a dynamic fetch here. So that would be at least reducing some of the bundle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also have a question. How about image resizing or all this image manipulation stuff that Silverstripe brings out of the box? Do you have to recreate it in Node.js or in Next.js, or can you use the resized images from Silverstripe?
We've been doing it in a bunch of different ways during the project to try it out. We have been using default Silverstripe resizing, but there's also very nice tooling with Next.js for images. It can downsample and resize images pretty easily. So currently we're using that, but it's a bit of a hassle when you're using a Docker setup because everything just, yeah.
I once had a project with Gatsby, and on every Gatsby build, it resized the same images for 10 minutes or something like that. So it was not really usable for me.
Okay, yeah.
That setup.
We haven't had any issues with it so far. And Next caches everything that you do. So and has some nice like loading features when images are not available or loading. So Next is really an impressive framework right now. We think it's probably the most production-ready JavaScript framework.
Thank you.
Any other
Any more
questions?
Because I have a question in the app. Shiva asks, when you have a headless application design, in what way do you provide details to your application that should not be visible in the API? Or the API is protected and not visible at all for the end user?
Since we're using just native Silverstripe functionality, like we have the user available when we do all the fetching for the API. So if there's sensitive data that's like behind auth, we can, it's not visible. And if we need it, then we will probably do like GraphQL fetching, where we also have the authentication and can fetch it behind auth. So yeah, if that answers the question, I'm not sure.
What about the review or content commerce site you had there with the reviews? Are you worried about scrapers or something having easier way to access all your data because you expose it over an API then?
Beautifully formatted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Making life
Wonderfully,
easy.
yeah.
I'm not involved in that project, but we haven't thought about it actually.
Okay.
So it's a concern for sure. We could do, since we're doing, it wouldn't be that difficult to just add some auth to the API, since we do all the fetching from that API, the REST API, is done from the node server. So if we had add some sort of auth there, it would be protected.
Because you only need to expose it to the node server.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be, okay.
Yeah,
Any more questions?
yeah, there was a question in the second one.
Okay. Okay, you got it.
Okay. Thomas?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, what are the main reasoning for going headless on a project like this? Maybe I can't get my head around it. I just want to really understand what kind of talks did you have with the client, or is it something that you guys decided that's the way to go, or and just the reasoning behind that, if you could explain that.
A lot of the reasoning is we want to have a good headless setup for any client, available to any client, because we want to experiment with new things a lot of times. We don't want to be stuck with just one solution. So just at the start, it was just that thought. Like we want to have some sort of headless solution available, and what it's going to end up like in 2 years, we don't know. So we just need to split everything up first. And for the decision of when you should use, when you want like to go headless, that's always a difficult question because it is more time consuming and it is more complex. So it's just like if you think that your front-end tooling will be better, like you can use React, you can make these flashy apps a lot easier. I think headless is a good solution, as well as when you have multiple planned front ends, like an app or a website or something like this. Yeah. And we think it's good for future-proofing, since a lot of front-end frameworks are always evolving, and being able to use modern technologies is for sure an advantage. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I see none through the app, so thank you.
Yeah.